The G3 is a stunning piece of high tech, and if Google could strong-arm LG into making a Nexus version, then I think there will be no competition from anyone for another year at least. This is the official LG product anyway, armed with quite a few little manufacturer tweaks that you all know I love. The first thing to note, and it's not obvious from photos, is that the G3 is a significant size bump from the G2, around 8mm longer and 4mm wider. You can get an idea. I haven't got a G2 here, but this is my Galaxy Nexus, just to give you an idea of scale there. Significantly, though, the G3 is still 5mm shorter and 4mm narrower than Samsung's Note 2 and Note 3 phablets, despite having a 5.5-inch display here, thanks to thin bezels all round and good design by LG. However, it's now right at the edge of what the average human hand finds comfortable in a mainstream phone, right at the edge. It is easy to forgive the extra girth when the package is taken as a whole. This is perhaps the most complete smartphone ever created. Every feature anyone has ever wanted, I think, aside from my beloved Xenon Flash, of course. The small bezels mean that the G3 never feels like a phablet in the hand, with a nicely curved back. The materials used here are 100% plastic, with the removable back shell glazed to look like aluminium. Your fingers expect cold metal and they get soft and warm plastic, but then if metal really were used, then the cost would be higher and RF transmission and reception that much more problematic. Having the back be removable means that happily LG has at last copied Samsung's unique selling point of having a removable battery. I realise that some people are very happy with a sealed design, but a year or two down the road, being able to buy and slot in a brand new cell may make all the difference to you or a family member you've passed it down to. Or if you're a true road warrior, you can just buy and swap in a spare charged cell on heavy days out. Battery flexibility is extended further by having Qi charging built into the G3 out of the box. So you can pop it down on your bedside or desk side charge at any point, and the G3 will always be topped up and ready to roll. Add in the 3000 milliamp hour capacity and you've got quite a capable power setup here. In daily use, battery life is quite decent with the Snapdragon 801 processor and 2GB of RAM working fairly efficiently, making up for the increased number of display pixels here that the G3 has to drive, around 80% more than on a typical 1080p display. The device's screen is a whopping 2560 by 1440 pixels. Yes, you heard that right. Labelled QHD, all in uppercase, as in Quad 720p HD, the G3's display is as crisp as you might imagine. It's absolutely true that most users simply won't be able to tell the difference between this and a 1080p panel in day-to-day use, but who cares? Given that the G3 isn't a premium price, is absolutely future-proof, and that the extra resolution is there to amaze when needed. LG ships a couple of rather over-processed 4K demonstration videos, and the effect is indeed somewhat jaw-dropping, even if you can't sit here on a 1080p phone show, with every trick in the book being pulled to convince you that this is what everyone needs in their phone. Finding accessible 4K content is still hard, but it'll get easier in time, of course. The QHD screen is for the moment a serious technical achievement, and so what if most people don't even recognise the significance? Think of it as future-proofing. As with the G2, power, volume up and volume down are all now on the back, and you do get used to them after a while. The power button is now domed and the volume keys recessed, so it's fairly easy for your fingers to find their way around sight unseen. Next to the camera glass is the dual LED flash, one each of two different hues, with software control over how intensely each gets fired in any particular low light situation, iPhone 5S style. Here's the much vaunted infrared laser focusing system, nothing more in fact than a traditional camera infrared aid, though very welcome compared to the typical phone camera adjust the focus until you get maximum contrast approach. Results from the G3 camera are generally pretty good, though it's ultimately just a standard 13 megapixel 1/3.2 inch sensor, and with full auto mode it's very easy to have highlights blown out in sunshine, and this is despite HDR being on by default. OIS is included, though it's 2-axis only, as on the G2. Still, it helps with low light scenes where the electronic shutter will be open for a while, etc. See these photo samples and crops for an idea of quality, some good, some bad. Holding down the shutter capture icon provides a very fast burst mode. And cleverly, the version of Android Gallery here helps keep the burst shots in one clump, rather than taking out multiple slots in the thumbnail grid. A really neat innovation is when taking selfies using the front-facing camera with the option to use a full brightness lit rectangle on the display. Maybe you can just see the Nokia 808 shooting this around a reduced size viewfinder. Effectively, the display becomes the LED flash for the front-facing camera. And this is test video capture with autofocus, of course, full 1080p on the LG G3, brand new, staring at this faux metal backplate. See what you think of the photo quality and audio. Now, I know the LG G3 shoots video at 4K, but here this is a 1080p video show, so I'm experimenting with splaying and pinching on the screen to do zooming. First, kind of intelligent digital zoom, interpolating, and then it becomes standard blocky digital artifacts. But notice also that the audio gets processed. The phone thinks you're shooting something further away, so it dramatically amplifies the audio, which can be a bit ugly in this case, as I'm not varying my distance from the phone. So I guess if you're shooting a rock concert and the volume's constant to your ears, the volume will go up and down as you zoom in, and the music carries on playing, and then you zoom out and find it's much, much quieter. So I wish that was a setting that you could be turned off. The audio side of things is excellent too, with good output via quality in-ear headphones supplied and a speaker that's loud and of reasonable fidelity. This is maximum volume. That's pretty good. I think for podcasts and speakerphone, that'll be no problem at all. Overall performance of the G3 is okay. Those screen transitions and pop-ups were slightly slower than on other top 2014 devices, indicating perhaps that pushing all those QHD pixels around takes extra effort. Maybe LG can optimize things more in firmware. There's certainly plenty you can fiddle with on the G3, with some of the UI aids copied verbatim from Samsung, and dual window, smart screen, arguably the quick circle flip cover, etc. And others unique to LG, including a virtual keyboard whose height can be adjusted. This latter seems interesting, with the possibility of having more actual content on screen while entering text, though there's a minimum height and this isn't significantly smaller than the standard stock Android keyboard on most other phones. I'd have liked to have seen this idea extended further for special uses, and also to have had the keyboard adjustable at any time and not just from deep in the bowels of settings. LG's skin over Android follows the general trend across the industry of being ever lighter and less intrusive, thank goodness. The notifications pane, a bloated nightmare on the G2, has been noticeably trimmed down, is now usable and customizable. LG has also rewritten some of the core Android applications, and for the better, with Calendar here being an excellent example, with the home view being a grid of the month with entries partially shown in plain text, and all meaning I don't need to fall back on my standard Android staple of the third-party touch calendar. Unique to the G3 is knock code, an extension of the double tap to unlock system to also provide some security. Essentially, you specify a sequence of screen quadrants to tap. Get the sequence wrong and the G3 remains locked. It's a nice idea and well implemented, though of course the security is, just as for patterns and pins, of course, possibly compromised by others seeing you tapping away and making a mental note of what you did. Also unique, but not actually any use, is Smart Notice, a Google Now wannabe widget that aims to suggest things you might want to do or know about. In my review period, all it wanted to tell me about were LG promotional tips about the device or truncated messages about the weather. Much work to be done here, LG, if indeed it's needed at all. The G3's exact specifications vary according to market, with the review unit coming with a 16GB internal storage plus micro SD here, also accessible here under the cover, and 2GB of RAM, though other markets, presumably those with more complicated graphical character sets, all of which need representing on the QHD screen, let's unlock it there, get 32GB and 3GB of RAM. Not that I'm jealous. The LG G3 ends up as a really high-end all-rounder. Materials, specifications, components, innovations, all are top-end, yet with a price that at well under £500 in the UK is up to 20% lower than the level at which its competitors launched. It's not often I come across a smartphone for which there's nothing significant to complain about, but the G3 does fit that description, with the only possible serious objection being the size itself. Last year's G2 may still better suit the palms and wallets of those with smaller hands. Overall, though, the LG G3 sets the benchmark for other QHD screen smartphones through 2014 and 2015.